Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk a little bit about what it was like to find out about music in the 80s. It was a different time. There was no internet. You couldn't just get all the information you need about a band in a minute's notice. Back then, you really had to dig, and you were lucky to come across any information at all. Most importantly, you had to make friends. When I was 13, 14, 15, all I wanted to do was hang out with kids that were 16, 17, and 18. Those few years were crucial for what was going on at the time. For alternative and new wave music and for punk music, those few extra years, that information was gold, and I really tried to tap into that. Not everyone was lucky enough to have a record store nearby, or if they did have one, they didn't stock a lot of really cool alternative music. It was very hard to come by, so we had to be really creative in finding out about it. One of the best places to discover music at that time was the library. You wouldn't believe it, but all the way in the back, behind all the books, there was a little record room where you could check out records. The room was kind of like this, floor to ceiling records. They had a little bit of everything. Classical music, they had folkways records, they had rock music, they had jazz, world music, everything. Comedy records. It may not have been the perfect collection, but it was certainly a free way to discover everything because there was no Spotify. You couldn't just find out about anything at a moment's notice. And you can check out records a couple every week, and man, that was a doorway. That was a huge doorway. Yeah, sure, you can hear a Neil Young record, it might be scratched up, but it was free. You didn't have to buy it. Some of the things they have at the library that might be of interest were resource books. Now, what were you going to do with a price guide at 14 years old? You didn't know what most of the stuff was in the book, let alone about different pressings or what the value of money was. When minimum wage was $3.50 an hour, what are you going to do about some doo-wop record that nobody cares about? Let's take a look at some of the other books they might have had if you were lucky. There were things like this Volume by B. George and Martha Defoe. This is the original Discogs. It's pretty unbelievable what they were doing in the early 80s with this. This was just a list of bands and all the records that they had released. No prices, no real information, no nothing. What they did have in the back were lists of newspapers, clubs, record labels, and stuff that you can get more information from. That was pretty unbelievable. This was gold if you knew what to do with it. B. George would go on to open the Archive of Contemporary Music. It's an archive of over 400,000 records for musical research. The 78 collection has been digitized and uploaded to the Internet Archive where anyone can access the music. Then there was this, the Trouser Press Record Guide. Holy cow, this was it. This was it. This was the Bible for me and my friends. This is how we learned about music. Every every band that was around at the time that was new was in this book. It was a little 3-4 paragraph review of the band and a list of all the records they had put out. Sometimes the bands would be cross referenced with other bands so you can find out about other stuff, but we would just sit and go through this book. Oh my God, we would just read and call out to each other, hey, did you hear about this band? Did you hear about that band? We didn't hear the music, but at least we knew what was out there. This was it. This was really the most important book at the time. Hopefully, if you had a good record store, they might have carried some zines as well. Some really good ones at the time were Search and Destroy and Research. These were published by V. Val out of San Francisco. They were unbelievable. The articles were really well researched and the content was just couldn't be matched. I mean, if you look at this stuff, you've got DNA, you've got James Blood Ulmer. I mean, where do you find stuff like this? I mean, Patti Smith, The Weirdos, Iggy, Devo, The Clash, The Ramones. This is the kind of stuff I was looking for. And once I found out about this magazine, which was in the late 80s from a friend of mine, man, I looked really hard to find these and I collected them all. Another magazine that I came across as a teenager was this Debut Magazine. It was basically a compilation album with a magazine attached to it. It was pretty interesting. I mean, if you look, it's got Ultravox on the cover. They got Scott Walker. They've got Orange Juice from Scotland. I mean, let's look at some of these articles inside, like this one about The Cure. Another fanzine that was really good at the time was Touch and Go. This was really super. It was a punk rock fanzine out of the Midwest. Went on to become a really famous record label. But back then, they were a punk zine and they were doing some pretty amazing stuff. Another really great magazine at the time was Flipside. When I was getting more into punk rock from New Wave, this and Maximum Rock and Roll were really important to me. I mean, both of these were reviewing all kinds of stuff that you could never find, really obscure stuff. And the ads in the magazines, this is how you found out about stuff. They had all kinds of good interviews, and funny enough, in the back, they had a pen pal section. And yes, back then, we had pen pals. There were a few people I wrote to, and we had really good letter exchanges, tape exchanges. It was a really great way to find out about stuff, and it was a really great way to meet people across the country. Another great magazine in the 80s was this, Forced Exposure. Man, when I was really getting deep into alternative music, this was it. I mean, Diamandouros and Robert Williams on the cover. Who does this? It was very well written, and the artists who were in the magazine were also writing in the magazine. So you had articles written by Thurston Moore, Steve Albini, Byron Coley. I mean, it was a who's who of alternative music at the time, and they covered all kinds of stuff. Another thing that really made an influence on me as a teenager was this book, The Hip. I don't know what it was, but that image of Chet Baker on the cover just sucked me in. I was already curious about jazz and listening to it on the radio, although it's not a comprehensive book by any means. It really kind of broke down what the different subgenres were of jazz, and because I didn't know, man, I was just a kid listening to music. It was just jazz to me. It focused a lot on the fashion, on the graphic design image, and just the aesthetic of jazz overall, which for me as a kid, it was really enticing and it really sucked me in. And because of this book, it was the first step into me becoming a lifelong jazz collector. If you had a good bookstore, you would have access to some good magazines. Sure, there was stuff like Rolling Stone, which was really, the big one at the time, but they were pretty much irrelevant because, yeah, they might write a 5-star review about Richard Thompson, but if you want to learn about punk rock and new wave, I mean, you're going to read stuff that's like 2 months old and a little blurb in the page 6, and that doesn't mean anything to anyone. Spin started publishing about the middle of my high school years, and they tried to be the new Rolling Stone, and they were pretty successful about having a good mix of stuff in there, but it was okay, but that stuff was still a little kind of out of reach for what I wanted. And the best thing for me, in the next to back page, there was an article by Henry Rollins every month about life on the road with Black Flag. It was a really great and funny read, and that was the one thing I always looked forward to every month. If you were really lucky, you got imported magazines from the UK like Number One, Smash Hits, and Sounds. Those were really great places to learn about music, and they came out every 2 weeks, so they were really up to the minute of what was going on. A really great magazine I discovered in Bleecker Bob's back in the 80s was called Hot Wax. This was a Canadian magazine, and it blew my mind. It was all about bootleg LPs. I mean, cover to cover reviews of bootleg LPs, trademark of quality type stuff, and th- this was unreal. I mean, I could barely afford regular records, let alone these bootlegs, but man, was I fascinated by this. Holy cow. I remember at Bleecker Bob's there was one 2 LP set that I really wanted. It was the Jam's last concert, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I don't know how it sounded, but it looked so cool. It was so expensive, but it was not going to be. It just never was to be. And maybe I'll find the concert on the internet or something, but man, that was the kind of stuff you would find in Hot Wax. Another place to learn about music at the time was a TV show called Night Flight on USA Network. This was on every Friday and Saturday night. They would show an underground film, usually a great underground film like Rude Boy or Ladies and Gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains. It would be filled with music videos and interviews with musicians. This was really something special. I used to record it every Friday and Saturday night. Eventually, during the week, I would find my sister had taped over all the episodes with General Hospital, but man, I still have a few videotapes of this, and those things were they were really part of my blueprint of my teenage years. So that's how we did it. There wasn't a lot out there, but there was stuff out there. We had to really work hard, and finding the music this way, it really gave us a personal connection to the music. You wouldn't have that today. I mean, when you found a record, you wanted it. And when you wanted it, you bought it. And when you bought it, if you didn't like it, you still listened to it 5 or 6 times because, man, that was all you had. That was it. You didn't have many records. You couldn't just go online and buy a record because there was no online. I mean, you knew your records. You knew the liner notes, you knew the music, you knew every sound on them. You listened to them over and over and over. Because if you were a kid, you would go once a week to the record store if you were lucky, and you would just, whatever you had, that $5, that one thing you bought, that was it for the week. That was all you had. If you didn't have it and your friends didn't have it, there was no way you were going to hear it. Well, thanks for coming with me on this little journey through my archives. I really appreciate you being here. It's fun to share it with you. Please like and subscribe for more content. Thank you. We'll see you next time.